So, how does it feel like to have the roles reversed for once?
Great to be here. I might actually had the first chance to speak freely about my views, which as a podcast host, I didn't feel that was the priority. I felt I needed to, yeah. So it's a nice luxury.
And what made you go into podcasting to begin with?
Hmm. So I've been writing for quite a while, both on Medium and Substack, and I suppose what I thought was, um, it- writing isn't the only medium and also isn't the preferred medium for some people. Like some people prefer or only engage with video. Um, so I thought, well, number one, I could reach a different or broader audience by producing video-based content. And number two, I think, especially because I wanted to do like a conversation, and I think that's again a very, very different format. Like when I write an article, it's my voice and my opinion, and that's fine. But I love the conversation format. I mean, I'm quite a chatty person. I have a lot of friends. I like to chat with them, and what I find are some of the most interesting things I've learned are sometimes through discussions and through being challenged or being exposed to someone's different ideas. And that's really exciting and interesting to me. And of course, that isn't what you get when you're writing an article as a monologue. So I kind of wanted to share some of that um, engagement and excitement that comes from a conversation where you don't know exactly. Like I usually have a rough idea of where the podcast will go, but it's not scripted. So there's that excitement of the discovery of where it will go because it's quite an organic thing. And I believe that there are some audiences that like that as well, like that a conversation.
And usually, it's not like the top people in tech you are interviewing or talking with. It's usually not like tech CEOs or big shots. It's usually other Substack writers like myself, and what can we say, more regular people. Why did you make that decision to not try and speak with the big stars?
Yes, that I would say that's a very uh, unique difference about my podcast and pretty much every other podcast out there about AI. And I feel very, very passionately about this. Um, and this is also the motivation for my publication as well with my articles. I suppose so I have a technical background I've been an AI researcher, data scientist, and I've been an AI consultant. So I have a technical side. What I've realized is there's a big gap between where the AI technology is and where it's going and how it works and people's understanding of it, which is generally not very good. Um, so I feel very passionate in everything that I do to improve people's understanding. I don't want to tell them what to think or what to decide, but I would like to provide them with more background of what the truth is and what the facts are. So what I see in most podcasts about AI is there's a focus on, and there's very lots of important discussions, both ethical, moral, practical. This technology is really impacting a lot of people's lives around the world. Um, and what we tend to see in a lot of the discussions around AI, including the podcasts, is all the focus seems to be on uh, technical experts or CEOs generally, or yeah, people that are technical. And I feel that's, um, I mean, I'll be very honest. I feel that's stupid, outrageous, and ridiculous. And the reason for that is like AI is a technology that is impacting everybody. It has great potential to disrupt a lot of people's work and life. Some people are realizing that as well. Some people are worried about that. And there's some very, very important moral, ethical issues. I know in our podcast discussion, we discussed, for example, the way Europe is leading in terms of AI regulation. Um, there are some very, very important issues that need to be decided by society about AI. And in a certain way, it's good that governments are getting involved because that's how citizens can get involved and help shape society. And yet, at the same time, when I see a lot of these discussions in the media, sometimes being dominated by a few voices, tech CEOs are a very narrow and unrepresentative demographic of society and humanity. And I feel it's fundamentally wrong to allow only a very small number of people to comment and decide on what's important about AI or not. So that's why I wanted to do something very, very different with my podcast. I basically wanted to do the anti of that, which is like, no, you know what? I'm not going to talk to any tech CEOs or AI experts. I want to talk to everybody else, which is basically the rest of the world. And I wanted to get an idea of not only people from different backgrounds, but people from different countries and cultures, from Europe, from Asia, from America, the whole world, because I think this technology is going to impact everyone across the world. And I think it's important for us to understand how people from different ages, backgrounds, cultures see this and are thinking about this. I think that's really, really important, that these decisions are not made by a small, unrepresentative group of people that live in Silicon Valley, for example. I think that's outrageously wrong. So I try to address that in some small way in my podcast.
And this might be a difficult question to lay on you, but I'm just very curious. What have you learned so far with all these conversations? Can you already now see that do you have gained some perspective on how these different people feel about AI and its development?
So I've had about 16 people on my podcast so far. Yeah, from I suppose 3 or 4 continents, like America, of course, because a lot of people are from there and would be interested. From Europe, including you, of course. And I did speak to a couple of people from Asia as well, and somewhere in Central America. But it is only 16, so I will caveat what I say is being a technical and data person. A sample size of 16 is very, very small, so not going to be conclusive. So I'll just caveat what I will say based on that. But
What's the sentiment?
yeah, mixture. I mean, I would say a mixture of concern uh, about the way people, concern for people's futures, concern that they're not being involved, of the threat to the way they live, their work, the way this technology, if used not well or for the good of all, could have a negative impact on society, but also hope for good use, and also examples of where it can be used in a good way. Another thing that I noticed that was quite interesting, let's say, for example, and this is why it's very important to me to at least have some representation from non-Western countries. So, for example, one of my guests was someone called Sarah Tan. She's a designer from Singapore, and I had a sense that the Eastern perspective is and also I have done some other research on articles about this as well. So it's not only with my interview with her. One difference and there are a few I noticed between the Western perspective and, for example, the Eastern and the Asian perspective about AI. And again, careful to generalize. Obviously, individuals are going to be different, but just as a broad idea, I noticed that there's a bit more emphasis on a pragmatic approach in the East and a bit more ideals focus in the West. So, for example, the ideals focus could be about, and even within ideals focus, there's multiple sides. On the one hand, you could be ideal focused in the West and a freedom utopian, and you just want the freedom to build AI, and you're not worried about safety. So that's one side of the AI utopians. And then you could have the people that are more AI skeptics in the West, and they're more maybe worried about things like their job security, their what's right, protecting citizens and societies, and that's also an ideal. So even though in the West we see them as opposites, the pro and anti AI, by comparing it to different cultures, I've noticed there's actually something also in common, even with the two sides, even in the West, which is they're both ideal focus. And of course, that shouldn't surprise us because of the values of the West. But whereas I noticed, for example, in the East, yeah, there was much more of a focus on what can work. Um, we have this problem. What can we do to solve this practical problem to make this work? And not so much focus necessarily on what is the right thing to do or what could be a risk with this, or less focus on that. And also other differences in terms of values, because they just have different values in the East, and a bit more emphasis on the East of, if they did speak about what is AI in relation to the public good, then it's more on a collective sense of what is good for society, um, rather than what I see in the West and in discussions in the West or opinions. It's more on what is good for citizens or individuals more, even though obviously there's differences. So, for example, the European legislation we're speaking about obviously intends to protect European citizens, but I would still distinguish the emphasis is still on protecting the individual rights of citizens. Even if that's doing it for all citizens, it's focused on protecting the individual rights of citizens in Europe, for example. Whereas in the East, it was, maybe I had more of a sense of what is good for the people rather than for me as an individual, which is of course another general difference between the East and West. And I suspected that would be the case, because I think that's true to some extent generally anyway between the East and Western cultures. And I discovered it in relation to AI. So I was, in a certain way, I was almost using AI as an excuse to look at cultural differences a little bit. And I'm very sad I wasn't able to find guests in a couple of other continents. I would have been very interested. I did have someone, it just didn't pan out. It was from Africa. That would have been a really, really interesting perspective, in South America as well. So
Yeah, I understand. That's also the fascinating thing with the general purpose technology like AI, that you can have so many opinions about it, and there are so many different views on it. And some of the mainstream views that we hear in the media is often from tech CEOs and people who have a strong financial interest in promoting this technology. How can people try to find accurate information about AI? And what do? You have, of course, a more technical understanding than me and most other people have.
mm, that's a very, very good question. And to be honest, I really, really sympathize with all citizens, because I think with technology, but with many other areas, I kind of feel we are not well informed by the media. What I mean by that is, for me, what well informed means is giving me a balanced perspective and a range of like facts, and allowing me to make my own decision. Like for me, that would be what the function of the media should be. But um, to be honest, I rarely see that. And so what that means is we get opinion mixed up with facts, or sometimes we don't even get facts, or we get, imaginations. So in terms of relation to AI, although this could apply to almost anything else, number one, I would definitely seek a diversity of views. So if you've heard something about AI, one of the dangers can be is that we get, and I think when the media functions badly, it's when they sensationalize and make provocative headlines that are intended to get clicks and that kind of thing. And this doesn't tend to encourage more balanced and rational critical thinking, is what I'm, I suppose, really getting at. And so, what I would advise is if you hear something in the news about AI, um, don't automatically believe it, whatever that is, and question, well, is that reasonable? Like, what could be some reasons that could be true, and are there any reasons they could not be true? And maybe even being curious to find out the opposite. So that would be the like quick advice. More other advices like what are like more trusted news sources about AI that I would rely on? Well, I mean, one of them, which isn't accessible for most people, is more of the like technical blogs and write-ups. And um, because they're technical, they tend to be pretty accurate in terms of just reporting about the technology. But then I'm able to interpret that and go, okay, this could mean this for this area or whatever. But obviously, most people will not be able to digest those technical blogs. But one thing I would recommend that I also do follow, which is not technical, is actually intended, is Andrew Ning, who is a former head of Google Research. He's an educator, runs Coursera. He created that, and Andrew Ning actually runs I think a 2 weekly newsletter. And it's just summary, non-technical. I mean, there are some elements about AI, but he makes it accessible. He says, what does this mean? I mean, literally, he will say, this happened in AI. Why does it matter? And he'll explain why it matters and what could this mean for the future. And I love that. He basically does that good job of interpreting things, current, like latest events. And so definitely I would recommend Andrew Ning, Deep Learning AI is his website. One of, I would say, the most balanced, technically credible. So he's a technical person. So what he's saying, he knows is actually correct and not just a made up thing that people might be fearful, but it's absolutely not true. He has a technical background. He's an academic, former Stanford professor. He's he bases his views on evidence, not just trying to create clickbait news stories. And he does the thing that I feel much of the media doesn't, which is he provides the information and he lets people decide for themselves. He kind of says, well, this is this thing, this is what it could do, this is what the potential impact could be, and he leaves it to the readers to decide. And he puts that in plain English. So definitely, that's one of my top sources in terms of a generally accessible news, very trusted news source on AI that gives a balanced, more objective view about what's going on. Yeah, probably my top resource for non-technical.
Thanks for sharing. And I feel like you, I've arrived at the same conclusions. What I do is also just to supplement your point is to subscribe to many different Substack writers who write about AI. And if I subscribe to 50 different people, I'll get 50 different views. And then I can kind of shape my own views based on that. That's a great source of information. Some of it we have to take with a grain of salt. And that goes for everything. In general, the AI is a tough space to be engaged because there's just so much happening all the time. So you can write about some new event that is happening, and 2 weeks after, the situation looks completely different. So it's really hard to keep the pace, and it goes extremely fast, which is also why it's fun. So it's both and.
And
What
what
do you? Yeah.
something I noticed in my writing. So I write a range of things from very factual, purely this happened, that kind of thing, to things that are more speculative. And what I noticed, which I kind of have quite mixed feelings about, although I'm not entirely happy about it, is one of my most popular articles was actually quite a very speculative one. So it's basically when the Claude model came out, and they did some tests. So they did all these different tests about its intelligence, but they also did some tests which could be regarded as proxies for tests of consciousness and self-awareness, and it seemed to pass some of those. And so basically, what I wrote in that article, it's basically, I've forgotten the name of the title, but Claude 3 shows signs of metacognition. Uh, could this possibly indicate consciousness? And so basically, it's speculative. There's definitely not conclusive proof or evidence, even though it passed these tests. That is definitely not enough proof. But it was, from a purely scientific point of view, that's an interesting little bit of evidence. You can't say it's conscious based on that. And I tried to be very carefully, just saying, well, it could be, but strictly speaking, uh, you know, not. But that seemed to get one of my most popular articles, and I was like, yeah, I can sort of get why that could be exciting for people, but I kind of wish people were as interested in the ones that are factual, because it's like that's important too. Not what is speculation. I mean, it's useful speculation, but that isn't the same as facts. And I just wish people were as interested in some of my more fact-based ones as well sometimes, even though they might seem a bit boring, because it's like, we're not speculating about living AI just yet, and some of the boring steps that we will have to take if we ever get there are actually going to be really important, but doesn't get as many clicks.
That's exactly right. That's such a good point. And it's so important to be aware of that, especially if you want to make a living online, that the internet just have this tendency of radicalizing people. We can look at Elon Musk, we can look at Jordan Peterson, we can look at all these internet sensations. Over time, they just become more and more, uh, what's the word? Degenerative, degenerated. It's it's really messed up what the internet does to people. And it's so true that provocative content and people that kind of evoke emotions in people, that's what's, floating on social media and on Substack as well. Substack is not as bad as X or Instagram or some of those medias, or TikTok, God forbid. But there's something to it for sure, and it's important to be aware of.
Mm. Yeah, no, you're completely right. Unfortunately, the sometimes the financial incentives are not well aligned with the truth. I could put it that way. In that, you know, which gets more money, like the truth or something that angers or excites people, and like that's. I do think actually Substack's a bit better on that, because actually the revenue model is not based on directly on number of clicks or things. It's based on subscription. So I'm not saying that's perfect, because you still could have a publication that's all about screaming lies or whatever that gets. But I'm just saying that it's not directly encouraging sensational headlines. It's saying, do you want to subscribe to this person's publication? If you do, great. And then you're supporting all their writing. It's not directly rewarding the most provocative content. And so I think compared to most other social media platforms, that's fantastic, actually. So
And I feel like you have a more direct connection with your audience because it's an email. So there's no recommendation algorithm that shows them your content on a feed. It goes directly into their inbox, and they subscribe because they want to hear what you have to say, hopefully. Otherwise, they'll unsubscribe. But that makes a huge difference. And that's also why I enjoy writing on Substack. It's something I've been thinking quite a lot about, what social media does to people and all that. What do you think about the intersection between the development we're seeing with AI right now, and then all the problems with social media? Is that something you have been thinking about?
oh yes, so from a historical point, I would say the issues with social media and its by the way, so this is not just my opinion. There's well documented studies and about the way social media algorithms, which are incentivizing to promote engagement and keep people on those platforms, how they tend towards more extreme or provocative content. Like, it's not that they're explicitly trying to do that. It's just a byproduct of saying, well, show them stuff that will keep them on the platform. So they can go, hey, we didn't tell it to show that extreme. But yeah, but I think they would have seen what the result of that has been. So that is pre-existed before AI anyway. That was just basic, what I would call basic machine learning, which is not quite the same thing as AI. Think of it as like a more basic version. But so that predates AI, and then obviously AI has now come along on top of that.
Is it
Yeah, that's
something
quite.
you're worried about?
Yeah, it is quite concerning because the potential for AI to just take that up to a whole nother level of providing ever more perfectly tailored content that's uh, going to keep you on there. And as many studies show, the kind of content that hijacks your limbic system so that you stay on there regardless of what you might want to do with your higher cognitive function is, extreme provocative content. And these AI systems are going to be able to do it a lot more effectively than previous machine learning systems. And what also worries me as well is, I mean, we may get onto speaking about AI legislation at some point, because obviously that's another interest of yours as well. But ideally, we need good AI legislation because this technology is powerful and has the potential to have harm. It can also have a lot of great benefits, but we need the legislation so that we get the benefits and not the harm. And what worries me is, I think, the danger of countries and legislators not getting ahead of where the technology is going. And I have actually changed my mind on something. I think when you interviewed me, also when I interviewed you, I was a little bit more skeptical that the EU had been one of the leading jurisdictions for AI legislation might have gone too far. I think that was my view then. But actually reflecting on this, um, that's not to say that I think they may well have made some mistake. But on the other hand, I can understand why they have gone too far, but just because it's moving so fast. And yeah, they're trying to prioritize safety, and maybe they do make some mistakes as a result of that. But I've actually changed my view on that now. I think that actually might be the better way to go. Do a bit more legislation than is maybe necessary. Yeah, maybe make some mistakes, but maybe that way round might be better. So I've changed my view actually.
Cool, cool. In a sense, I feel like it's already too late. In a sense, if we couple artificial intelligence with recommendation algorithms and social media and this whole technological wave, we should have regulated this 10 years ago. But of course, it's easy to look back and see our mistakes now. But I feel like profits nowadays have just trumped the regulators and the governments in general. Like if the
Mm,
for instance, let's say that the European Union really wanted to fix some of these issues social media might be causing for young children, and they, for instance, banned recommendation algorithms. Say for now on, you have to show your on social media platforms, you have to show people's posts in a chronological order, so there's no algorithms to analyze people and show them what they need. Such a thing would be impossible to implement now. There would be too much resistance, primarily from the big social media companies who are now more rich than most European countries individually. And also, there would be so much resistance from all these people who are completely addicted to social media, like teens and young people. You and me, we're from a time before the internet, where social media was not really a big thing. But this whole generation of people who are just grown up with iPads and iPhones and constant dopamine hits and constant feeds, it's really hard to stop this development. We should have stepped in a bit before. But I agree with what you're saying, and it's good to hear that we're kind of having the same view on this now. I feel like we have to backtrack, and sure, the European Union are going to make mistakes. They already made many mistakes, and they will continue to do so. But at least they're trying to stop this. It's not even capitalism. It's like beyond capitalism. It's like tech um, monopolism, kind of.
There was this I've forgotten his name now. He's the Yanis, the former
Ah,
Greek
yes,
finance
yes. I just
minister.
read his book.
Um, his
Great
book,
book.
Techno-feudalism. I think that's a
Exactly.
good metaphor description, techno-feudalism, because a couple of thoughts on what you were saying. So, number one, yes. So basically, I completely agree, and I think you're right. What's I find One thing I find extremely worrying is essentially the young generation and children that have now grown up, not only internet natives but mobile natives, not only mobile natives but TikTok natives, right? So some of the most addictive social media becoming their first experiences of the world, to the extent that we also now see the impact on their cognitive capacity, the lack of social skills, the rapid increase in mental health problems in young people, and their difficulties in socializing, which is not unrelated to social media addiction and mobile phone addiction. So, as you say, it's like people that are older and for where you can have an opinion. If you're older and you're pre this, you can kind of go either, oh well, I don't like this, I don't care about this, and you can be a Luddite or whatever, anti-techno person, or you could think, oh, maybe I'll dabble with it, all right? But either way, if you're an older person that's pre this, you have some degree of choice because you know something that's different. And if you're a younger person, they don't have that sense of choice because that's all they know, and you can really see that impact. So that is really having harm already. And the other point, a couple of points I wanted to make about the, how can I put it, the problems with the government. So one economic fact I'd like to highlight is, so I think generally, certainly in the UK, I think it's true across some degree of Europe, maybe also America, is economic growth over the last few decades has been difficult. It hasn't been as good as it could have been, and China has been the country that has had rapid growth for quite a few decades, and especially recently, certainly in the UK and I think a few other Western economies, we've really struggled with growing the economy, and I think this is also true to some extent in the US. The sectors that have done really well economically, especially in the last couple of years, are AI, and basically it's a Nasdaq. It's the tech companies that have held up the US stock market basically in terms of having the most gains. So you can kind of see how there's a, and also let's leave aside, well, mention the geopolitical context of AI, right? So there's the worry and concern. Everybody's rushing for AI, and in terms of its strategic and military applications. So obviously China and other countries, Russia, are advancing. So there's that context as well. So the pressure of Western governments, to kind of just keep this going, because number one, it's saving our economies and giving us growth where we're really struggling to get profitable companies. And then number two, oh, and this also helps us because we're already, so you can kind of see how it could force them to take a bit of a backseat, which is kind of what makes, I suppose, the European move quite brave in that way. But then they've tended to do that. They tended to make a point of we're going to do this for the good. But it's not the sense I get from, how can I put it, the UK and let's say America that don't tend to prioritize that so much. So And of course, they maybe tend to have, of course, more the profitable companies, but then they seem to be, it's that misalignment so that they can go, yes, geostrategic advantage of AI, great. Economic growth, where we're struggling to get that from other sectors of the economy, great. Oh, individual rights, public safety, yeah, maybe we'll think about that. It's a bit, and yeah, it's genuinely a difficult um problem.
It is. It is. What made you change your view on this?
I think oh, you mean on the
On the
this,
European regulation part?
yeah, I think it's just thinking a little bit more about the social media impact and also the way things are kind of moving now. There's almost like there's a little bit of a consolidation I see starting to happening in all the big AI companies. Not totally, but essentially real dominance by OpenAI, Microsoft, which is kind of the same thing. Um, Google should be a big player, but they just keep making mistakes. But they could
Mm.
be also. Facebook, obviously, another big player. Um, but it's very hard for any competition to come along because those big companies are very good at just buying them up as well, and they do that as well. So I just see that consolidation of that power, and then the increasing political influence of that economic power to influence the politics, and I feel sad about that because I wouldn't say I'm an AI optimist, but I'm more of a kind of AI realist who can also recognize some really great benefits of AI. And many of my articles do that. I remember somebody in one of my newsletters, I include other people's work as well sometimes, and I actually included somebody who was quite critical of AI, and I think she was quite surprised. And she was saying, "Oh, I'm really surprised because," and she put that in the comments, kind of like, because I'm quite critical about AI, and you're an AI um, advocate or something like that. She called me, and I said, actually, I don't see myself that way. I'm a pragmatist. Like, if it can work well, great, that's good. But we should also need to be honest about the dangers or the weaknesses, and that's kind of why I had included that thing as well because I wanted to have a bit of variety and balance because I do know sometimes my writing can focus a bit too much on the constructive and the positive potential. I mean, only because maybe I just see a lot more of the negative AI stories in a lot of articles out there. So that's why I edge towards that, but then I end up creating a different kind of imbalance in my own writing. So yeah, I'm a bit more worried about the potential public good not being served in the way things are going. I am also very critical of governments. I do not I think they have a lot of problems as well, but I don't have any other alternative power source, a solution that's big enough to even do anything apart from these imperfect governments, let's say. So yeah, I suppose that's what's kind of changed me a
Mm.
bit.
There's a lot of people who are tired of the government around the world. I think that's what's happening in France right now, where
Mm,
Marie Le Pen just had a very good election, and the same in the US, where Trump is doing well. I don't know if you
exactly.
saw the light. I don't want to make it political, but I don't know if you saw the debate between Trump and Biden at the
Yes.
US. And suddenly, after watching it, I can understand why people can't vote for Biden because he's simply too old. That's uh, that's what all the Trump supporters and all the MAGA supporters have been saying, and that talk just kind of proved them right. So it's terrifying, I think, because I don't like the development. I know Trump is going to give tax relief to the super wealthy. He's not going to regulate big tech as much. So from an AI angle, there'll be a lot to write about for me. For my writing career will be great because there'll be so many disasters, frankly, I think. But for the world, I think it will be sad. But that's just me, and let's not make it political. I think in general, compared to you, I'm a bit more skeptical about AI. But that doesn't mean that I try to be a pessimistic around it. You know, I've seen some writers and some quote unquote AI influencers who make a career out of criticizing AI and criticizing tech leaders. And that's not the kind of person I want to be. I'm like you, I want to be kind of objective and I want to find the truth. Like, what is this? How can we use it? So, to go in a more positive direction, um, with all these concerns, how do you think that the AI can benefit normal people like you and me?
Oh, yes, hugely. And again, this is something I have tried to do, which is focus more on the education aspect to some extent as well, because I think that's key in a lot of ways. If people don't understand how it can benefit them, or many people don't, and that's really important because if you can understand the potential of how it can benefit you, number one, you're more likely to try and say, "Hey, let's have more of that," and less of the thing that isn't so good. Um, so somebody had a quote. I can't remember who said it, but I think it rings well. And for me, I think it addresses both the fear and the opportunities of AI in one phrase. And the quote goes something along the lines of AI isn't going to take your job, but someone who knows how to use AI will. And I think that kind of sums it up in terms of um, yes, all the criticism saying AI, can't do our job or whatever as well. And um, I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing is, that's not, it's a bit too simplistic to say that because the thing is, AI is not a fixed thing, it's constantly getting better. However, what you could say is, for the foreseeable future, there are still capabilities it's not going to seemingly have anytime soon. Let's put it like that. And that's good enough for us to say it's not going to directly replace us. However, it can greatly enhance certain tasks and capabilities. So I use it in my writing, which is a very controversial thing to say amongst writers or even on Substack. But I'm trying to share more about that, even though that might get some flack, because when people think about AI being used in writing, they have this idea that, oh, that's about saying to ChatGPT, write me an article and copy and paste it. And I would say, yeah, that's a really stupid way to use it. And it's not actually the only way to use it. There's actually better ways to use it. So, for example, I use AI to give me feedback on my own writing, or maybe to suggest article title ideas or that kind of thing. Or maybe I'm stuck. I'm trying to express a certain idea and I say to I don't know ChatGPT or whatever, like I am trying to express this thing. What's a simpler way of, because remember, part of what I'm doing as well a little bit is trying to explain complex technical things in a way that's easy to understand. And I love that challenge, but sometimes I struggle with that challenge because sometimes it's tricky to explain something complicated in a simple way. So sometimes I might get a little bit of inspiration and help from the chat GPT to say, well, hey, this thing, technical thing, give me three simple ways of explaining it, or explain it like I'm a 5-year-old, or explain it like I'm 12. It's quite good at doing things like that. And again, it's not a matter of copying and pasting or cheating, that kind of thing. It's like using it like a partner. And that the way I'm describing it in writing is essentially the way it could and should be used in many, many other areas of work, not as a replacement, but as a performance enhancement, as a boost, help people be more productive, help them with their work. That is the good way to use AI that's going to reduce the amount of uh, sort of drudgery from work and actually allow us to focus on the parts of work that we enjoy and make us all more productive, um, rather than just replace us and AI terminated dystopian scenarios, which is not very likely. But even if it's what people tend to worry about a lot, but yeah, so that's why I try and encourage, and I also do. I practice what I'm trying to encourage. I'm doing myself, so I'm constantly looking at ways. How can I use AI to help me be better? Not how can I use AI to do my job and I just sit on a beach and do nothing. Again, that is a very common assumption. Unfortunately, it's just a silly way to use AI. You can understand if people don't understand what AI can do. That's a simple way to understand it. But what I'd like to get across is that's not a very good way, and it's not the best way to use it. And there's better ways to use it to help make you better. This is not about replacing you. It's about using it as a partner to make you better, basically.
That's the right way to use it for sure. I'm also a bit worried about some of these commercial people and CEOs who are looking to implement as much AI as possible to save money. And then they are really putting the quality of work in danger also, and the workflow could mess up and stuff like that. How can we keep from being over reliant on AI and use it productively as a tool and not get kind of consumed by it, if it makes sense?
Um, I suppose this is the answer what I would give. For me, that isn't a problem about AI. For me, that exposes how badly run many businesses are and how what bad CEOs we have in many companies. What I mean by that is, I don't, for me, I wouldn't excuse the CEOs for responsibility for those decisions. They're making those decisions maybe for all kinds of reasons. Maybe they um, feel under pressure from shareholders because I think that's happened with Apple recently, for example. Apple have been ignoring AI for ages, and now all of a sudden they're AI everything, and because they haven't had time to develop the technology themselves, they're now basically incorporating ChatGPT. I mean, it's kind of hilarious and humiliating that pretty much the most valuable company that's got billions and billions and billions in capital cannot come up with their own AI and is having to rely on. And so I think that shows failure on many, many levels. So for me, I think if we fix the corporate governance problem of which, so I think basically poor business leadership is rewarded. And I think that's more the fundamental problem. And so to be specific, obviously you can't expect a CEO to be an AI expert. Okay, let's get that. But they have the power and money to find and employ people that are, and then get their advice and take it seriously as well. And if they did, then you wouldn't get a lot of these failures because a good technical expert. Now, so the AI technology is not how can I put it? It's not like a microwave oven or something like that, where you push a button and something happens. Like an AI system is more not 100% certain, let's put it that way. So they're built out of these neural networks that that don't perfectly make the same decision every time, and also in such a way that you even understand how it's making that decision. So the technical term, or slightly technical term, of way you describe it, is non-deterministic. Because, like, if you have like a sausage machine, um, not only can you predict every time you put the meat in one end, you'll get a sausage out the other end. You can also explain exactly why, because you know how the machine works, and you go, well, this bit squeezes it, this bit. That isn't how AI works, and that is another thing that again people struggle to understand. It's in some ways it's more similar to our own brains, which again we also don't understand. Um, However, and I can imagine that's maybe quite alarming for some people to hear. But I would sort of just say, um, you to some extent you can get a little bit around that, or to some extent you can get a little bit more certainty. If not total certainty, you can get some certainty. And the way you do that is even if you don't understand how it works fully on the inside, and even if you can't predict exactly what it will do every time, what you can do is you can do many, many experiments on it and then see what happens. And then if it's working most of the time in the way that we want, then that's good. And then that's having experimental evidence rather than, I know it's going to be okay because I know how it works, which we don't have. But the other way around, we can go and go, well, I know it's probably going to be okay because we run it 1,000 times or 100,000 times, and 99.9 out of those times it produces the result that we want. So even if we don't understand something, we can use the experimental approach to gain some evidence and confidence. So even with all of that, if you have a good technical person who should be able to explain that to a CEO, then they need to think about the use cases. There could be some use cases of AI that don't require perfect accuracy or correctness, and there could be others that do. So, for example, if I'm doing a chest X-ray AI cancer diagnosis, I would not want to make that AI making the only decision. By the way, that's not what happens. Most of the AI systems, and they're pretty good actually, the AI systems for cancer X-ray detection, they're actually better on average than most humans, although they still make some mistakes. But they actually are better than humans right now, which is pretty good. But even then, they're still not used to make the final decision. All they do is just prioritize the list so that the most urgent ones get dealt with first. And it's always a human that makes a final diagnosis. But that's an example of a good way to use both together. And so that's what we need from good business leaders. We need them to employ technical experts that can explain the nuances of a particular use case. Because there's certain use cases of AI that kind of go, yeah, that's got a good chance of success. There's others that you kind of, that's more risky. And then this one is like, yeah, that's really not a good idea to do that. Like these are nuances that matter. And the CEOs need to and should be able to understand that. And I think that's not happening in a lot of companies, in a lot of big companies. And you have a lot of spectacular failures of, millions being spent on projects that end up failing because in the end they realize, oh, we didn't bother with that bit. We just got so excited about trying to throw this AI thing. We didn't define what success was, which is a very basic thing. Like, what do we want it to do? Oh, be great. No, a good technical or AI consultant will say, no, you need to define it a bit more clearly what success means to you, because then we can know if we get there or not, or if it's okay or not. And so that needs good, for example, AI consultants, and it also needs good leaders. And I think in a lot of businesses, they're rushing so fast, they don't have that. Either they don't have the good business leadership that knows how the difference between this has this is a bit risky. It might be okay most of the time, and it's actually an application that needs very, very good accuracy. But yeah, it's. I think we get a bit of a failure sometimes at the moment.
It reminds me of one of the best definitions I've heard of artificial intelligence. It's just more intelligence, understood in the sense that if a bad business is using AI, then it's going to be a worse business. And if it's a good business that's using AI, it's going to be better. So AI is just kind of supercharging, people's capability and productivity. So I think that's a cool way to look at it. We're running short on time.
Oh yes,
What can we expect from you on future AI in the future?
yeah. So I'm looking to be a little bit more focused on this actually, and where I've looked more generally on the broader impact on society. I'm looking to do more articles now, a bit more focused on specific areas of problem solving in different industries, and what can work and what doesn't work and why. So, which hopefully will be helpful. So, a bit more consultancy, and I'm actually looking to offer some freelance consulting services as well on top of that as well. So.
Cool. And just here at the end, I'll allow you to do some advertising for your courses if you like.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, as part of so I have a free newsletter and publication, but I also have a paid tier as well. And within the paid tier, there is some access to some exclusive articles, but also within the paid tier is access to currently 3 online courses, Two of them are just on taking a basic level AI, how to use it. The third one focuses on how you can use AI to help you with writing. And there should be more courses. So they're all included within my paid membership. And but then there's other things available in my free membership and free newsletter. So
Cool. All right. I had a great time talking with you. Thanks so much.
thanks. It's been really great to chat.